Welcome, everyone. Whether you're new to the channel or a returning viewer, thank you for joining us as we dive into one of the most bizarre and unsettling true crime cases of the 21st century. Today, we're looking at the tragic and mysterious death of Rey Rivera, a case filled with twists, dead ends, and unsettling questions that continue to linger. Rey Rivera's death was no ordinary tragedy. What was initially thought to be a suicide evolved into a chilling mystery that involved possible financial conspiracy, a hotel with a dark past, and an eerie sequence of events leading up to his untimely demise. This is the story of Rey Rivera, a promising young man whose death still haunts the people who loved him and the investigators trying to uncover the truth. Rey Rivera was a 32-year-old writer and a promising professional in Baltimore, Maryland. He had everything going for him: a loving wife, a good job, and an optimistic outlook on life. Rey was intelligent, ambitious, and had recently started a new career as a screenwriter. He had moved to Baltimore with his wife, Allison, to follow new career opportunities, and their life seemed perfect. His wife, Allison, described Rey as a caring, passionate person who was full of life. There was no indication that anything was wrong in their lives, nor did Rey show any signs of depression or suicidal thoughts. In fact, Rey had been actively pursuing his dreams. Things seemed to be on an upward trajectory for him. Little did anyone know that just weeks after starting this new chapter of his life, Rey would vanish in the most mysterious of ways. It was May 16, 2006, when Rey Rivera's story would take a tragic turn. That evening, he left for work but never returned home. The next day, Allison received a disturbing call from a friend of Rey's who mentioned that they couldn't reach him. That was when the first alarm bells rang. But what followed would raise far more disturbing questions than they could have ever imagined. The next day, on May 17, 2006, an employee at the Belvedere Hotel, an old, historic building in the city, made a grisly discovery. While checking the conference room area of the hotel, the employee found a body sprawled on the floor. It was Rey Rivera, his body in a strange and unexplainable position. What struck investigators immediately was the location of his body. He was lying face up in a room with no windows, a location that didn't seem to make sense for a man who was believed to have fallen to his death. Rey had died from blunt force trauma after falling from the hotel's rooftop. But the most perplexing part of the discovery was the path he had supposedly taken to get to the roof. The only accessible entry to the roof from inside the building was through a stairwell with a door that had been bolted shut. Rey's body was found on the floor of the hotel's conference room, which raised questions about how he ended up there. It didn't add up. If Rey had fallen from the roof, how did he get there in the first place? Why was he on the hotel's rooftop in the first place? What could have possibly driven him to such a location? It seemed as if the events leading up to his death were clouded in confusion. As the investigation unfolded, even more unsettling details emerged. Rey had been found with a handwritten note in his pocket, but it wasn't the kind of note that would give clarity to the situation. The note was cryptic, fragmented, and full of seemingly nonsensical ideas. It mentioned something about the roof, as well as words like sabotage and bad choices. The note raised further questions about Rey's state of mind leading up to his death. Had he been depressed? Had he gotten involved in something that led him to such a dark and desperate place? The investigators were also puzzled by the fact that Rey's car was parked at the hotel, a detail that seemed out of place. The hotel was located in an area Rey would not have usually gone to, suggesting that he had some reason to be there. But that wasn't all. The phone records revealed that Rey had spent a considerable amount of time on the phone with a close friend the night before his death. There was no indication of distress during the conversation, but Rey had seemed distracted at times. What could have led him to suddenly head to the hotel the next day and end up dead on the floor? As the investigation continued, a shocking detail surfaced, one that suggested Rey's death might have been tied to something much bigger than a personal crisis. Rey had recently become involved in a financial company, a company with connections to some of the most powerful figures in the industry. It was revealed that Rey had stumbled upon financial misconduct involving his employer. Rey was said to have been researching and writing about the company's shady dealings. Could this have been the reason for his sudden disappearance and death? Was Rey murdered to silence him, or was his death simply a tragic accident? The more the investigators uncovered, the clearer it became that there was a much darker side to Rey's death, a web of conspiracy, corruption, and financial manipulation that had led him down a dangerous path. Rey Rivera's death remains one of the most perplexing and chilling true crime cases in recent history. The circumstances surrounding his death raise more questions than answers. Was it a simple case of suicide? A tragic accident? Or was it murder, orchestrated to protect the powerful individuals involved in financial wrongdoing? The answers may never be fully known, but the mystery of Rey Rivera's death continues to captivate those who believe that a cover-up is at play. His family, especially his wife Allison, continues to search for the truth, hoping that the case will one day be solved. The haunting question remains: what really happened to Rey Rivera, and who was responsible for his tragic end? Before we dive deeper into Rey Rivera's mysterious death, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. What do you think happened to Rey? Was it a conspiracy? Or was it something darker? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. One of the most perplexing pieces of evidence in Rey Rivera's case was a note found in his pocket. It was a cryptic, almost incomprehensible collection of fragmented sentences, written hastily with no clear context. The note seemed to be a jumble of ideas, with words like roof, sabotage, and bad choices scattered throughout. Why did Rey leave such an odd message? Some believed it was a clue that would unlock the mystery of his death, while others speculated it was evidence of a troubled mind. What was Rey trying to communicate in his final moments? Was it a last-ditch attempt to explain himself, or was it a signal that something far darker was at play? The note was not clear enough to offer direct answers, but it was deeply unsettling. It suggested that Rey had been grappling with something, perhaps an internal conflict or a threat, that led to his tragic end. The problem was, no one knew what he was referring to. Was it a personal issue, a work-related problem, or something even more dangerous? Rey's phone records also provided some unsettling insights into his final days. On the night before his death, Rey had a conversation with a close friend. The friend later recalled that the conversation was somewhat odd. Rey was distracted and kept mentioning something vague about needing to go somewhere, but he never revealed why. The phone call wasn't filled with distress, but it did raise questions. Why did Rey seem preoccupied, and why didn't he mention anything specific about what he was doing? Could the conversation have been a clue that Rey was involved in something far more sinister than anyone had realized? Or was it simply the reflection of a man who was struggling emotionally? The strange nature of this phone call, combined with the fragmented note found in his pocket, added to the growing suspicion that Rey had been caught up in something that ultimately led to his death. But what exactly was that something, and who or what was involved? Another key mystery in Rey's case was why he was at the Belvedere Hotel in the first place. The Belvedere Hotel was an odd location for someone like Rey, especially since he was not known to frequent the area. How did he end up there, and why had he made his way to the hotel in the first place? One theory is that Rey had been called there by someone, possibly someone connected to his work or personal life. But the details of how Rey entered the hotel are even more unsettling. The hotel's rooftop, from which he supposedly fell, had a locked door. There was no reasonable way for Rey to have accessed the rooftop from inside the hotel. Investigators were baffled by this. It didn't seem to add up. Could Rey have been lured there for a specific reason? Or was this the site of something much more calculated? Adding another layer to the hotel's involvement, it was discovered that the Belvedere had a history of dark secrets and hidden rooms, and some even speculated that the hotel could have played a role in Rey's death. Was Rey led to that fateful location by someone with more sinister intentions, or was it simply a random set of circumstances? As the investigation progressed, an even more chilling possibility began to surface: Rey might have been murdered due to his knowledge of a financial scandal. Rey had recently become involved in a financial company that had some questionable dealings. In the weeks leading up to his death, Rey had been researching and writing about the company's involvement in potential corruption. This led some to speculate that Rey's death was not accidental or suicide, but a carefully planned murder orchestrated by people who wanted to silence him. Rey had become entangled in a conspiracy involving powerful financial figures, and someone wanted to make sure he didn't expose their secrets. The idea that Rey's death could have been linked to corporate espionage or a cover-up added an entire new dimension to the investigation. Could this be the reason Rey ended up at the Belvedere Hotel? Was someone trying to intimidate him or prevent him from going public with the financial wrongdoing he had discovered? Was Rey's death tied to a larger, far-reaching conspiracy? As the investigation unfolded, the police were left with a haunting question: was Rey Rivera's death a suicide, a tragic accident, or a calculated murder? At first, some believed Rey had taken his own life. The theory of suicide seemed to fit with the idea of a young man struggling with personal or financial issues. However, the more evidence that emerged, the more unlikely suicide seemed. The note, the cryptic message, the strange circumstances surrounding his death, all of these pieces pointed towards something darker. Was Rey murdered because he knew too much? Or had something else led him to a tragic and untimely death? The investigators could not ignore the mounting evidence that suggested Rey's death was not as simple as it seemed. As theories emerged, the complexity of the case grew. Each new clue seemed to open up more questions, and no one had the answers. As we dive deeper into this investigation of Rey Rivera's mysterious death, we are left with more questions than answers. What happened in the days leading up to his death? What did the cryptic note really mean? Was Rey involved in something larger than anyone could have imagined? And, most chilling of all, was his death the result of a dark conspiracy that remains hidden? Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement helps keep these stories alive. In the weeks before his death, Rey Rivera had begun working on something that would come to define the last chapter of his life, a financial story that had the potential to shake up a multi-million-dollar industry. Rey had taken a job as a writer for a company called the Financial Times, a publication known for reporting on high-level corporate activity and exposing corruption in the financial sector. He had started working on a story that he had become deeply passionate about. According to his wife, Allison, Rey had been looking into a major financial scandal involving powerful individuals at the top of the corporate world. While the full extent of the story was never fully revealed, it was clear that Rey was onto something significant, something that could have caused enormous damage to the people involved. Rey had been researching documents, making phone calls, and gathering information for the story, but he kept the details close to the chest. At first, Allison didn't think much of it, but as Rey's death approached, it became increasingly clear that this research might have been the key to understanding the final days of his life. Just days before his death, Rey had a conversation with a colleague who worked at the same company. According to the colleague, Rey was increasingly agitated during their discussions about the story. The colleague remembered Rey mentioning that he was getting close to uncovering something big, but he was also worried about the people involved. Rey even mentioned that he had started to receive anonymous threats. These revelations would later haunt his wife, Allison. Rey had kept much of this from her at the time, perhaps to protect her from the stress and danger of the situation. But looking back, Allison couldn't shake the feeling that Rey had been on the brink of uncovering something that could have cost him his life. This was the first indication that Rey might have been murdered because of what he knew. Could someone in the financial world have been threatened by his investigation? Could the story he was writing have gotten him into trouble? The possibility of Rey's death being tied to his research into corporate corruption now seemed more plausible than ever. As we continue to peel back the layers of this case, the Belvedere Hotel becomes more central to understanding Rey's death. After all, the location of his body and the circumstances surrounding the hotel's involvement are far too suspicious to ignore. The hotel's dark history and eerie atmosphere seem to play a role in the conspiracy theories surrounding Rey's death. In fact, some believe the hotel was no mere accident. Rey might have been lured there by someone with a vested interest in silencing him. The locked door leading to the rooftop, the cryptic note, the phone call, and Rey's sudden, unexplained appearance at the hotel all point to one chilling possibility: Rey was set up. The idea that Rey's death was orchestrated by powerful figures in the financial industry is not a far-fetched one. In fact, many believe that his research into the company's unethical dealings led to his downfall. What if Rey had gotten too close to exposing their crimes? What if the people he was investigating had resources and influence that allowed them to remove him without leaving a trace? The more investigators learned about Rey's final days, the clearer it became that he had stumbled upon a financial scandal that could have put the careers and livelihoods of powerful people at risk. The phone calls Rey had been making, the documents he had been gathering, and his sudden interest in a story that seemed out of place for someone in his position were all signs that Rey might have been investigating something huge. In the days before his death, Rey had received several strange and threatening messages. He mentioned to his colleagues that he felt watched and that certain people were trying to intimidate him into dropping the investigation. Was this why he was lured to the Belvedere Hotel? Had he been forced into a situation where he had no choice but to meet with those involved in the conspiracy, only to end up dead? While no direct evidence links his death to the financial scandal he was investigating, the timing and the circumstances surrounding Rey's last moments suggest that his research may have been the catalyst for his tragic death. Was Rey simply a casualty of the corporate world's hidden corruption? Before we continue, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Could this be the work of a corporate conspiracy? Or is there another explanation for Rey's untimely demise? Now, let's continue with Rey's story and the unresolved truths that still remain. As time passed, Rey Rivera's case continued to baffle investigators and true crime enthusiasts alike. While it seemed clear that something sinister was at play, the lack of concrete evidence and the seemingly coincidental nature of his death left authorities unable to make any definitive conclusions. But as more theories surfaced, one of the most chilling possibilities emerged: Rey's death may have been part of a larger, calculated cover-up involving powerful financial interests. The idea that Rey was murdered to silence him for what he had uncovered about a major financial conspiracy started to take center stage in the investigation. Rey had been investigating financial wrongdoing within a prominent corporation, a corporation with connections to powerful figures. It wasn't hard to imagine that those involved might have had the resources to eliminate someone who could expose their illegal activities. The presence of the Belvedere Hotel, the cryptic note, and Rey's involvement in a story that could have toppled careers all suggested that someone wanted to make sure Rey never published his findings. The question remained: who had the motive and the power to orchestrate such a murder, and why was Rey the one to pay the price? Over time, the theories surrounding Rey Rivera's death have continued to evolve. At first, it was believed that Rey's death might have been a suicide, possibly the result of depression or emotional turmoil. However, the more investigators uncovered, the less this theory seemed to hold up. The strange circumstances surrounding his death, the locked door to the rooftop, the odd positioning of his body, and the missing details in his personal life, all pointed to something far more sinister. Then, there was the theory of accidental death. Some believed that Rey could have accidentally fallen from the rooftop, but given the locked door, his strange behavior before the incident, and the lack of clear motives, this theory also seemed less likely. As new leads came to light, it became increasingly difficult to ignore the possibility of murder. Some believed that Rey was set up by someone close to him, a person who might have had access to him and the information he was researching. The fact that Rey had been working on a story about corporate corruption only deepened the suspicion that his death could have been the result of a targeted attack to prevent him from revealing the truth. The Belvedere Hotel has remained a key piece of the puzzle in the Rey Rivera case. The hotel's strange layout, history, and eerie atmosphere only added to the mystery of Rey's death. Some have speculated that Rey was lured to the hotel under false pretenses, perhaps by someone he trusted. Was the hotel the meeting place for a dangerous encounter? Was he led there by someone who had an interest in keeping him quiet? The idea that Rey was taken to the Belvedere to be silenced has continued to gain traction. The locked rooftop door, the strange nature of the discovery, and the odd positioning of his body all seem to suggest that Rey was not there by accident. He may have been intentionally placed in that room, and the tragic circumstances of his death may have been carefully orchestrated to ensure that he would never speak about what he had uncovered. As we wrap up our exploration of Rey Rivera's mysterious death, one thing remains clear: the case is far from over. Despite the passage of time and the unanswered questions, Rey's death continues to haunt those who knew him, and the investigation remains open. Rey's wife, Allison, has never given up hope of finding out the truth about what happened to her husband, and she continues to advocate for justice in his name. Rey's case has become a symbol of the dangers of uncovering dark secrets in the corporate world, where powerful figures are often able to shield themselves from the consequences of their actions. The chilling possibility that Rey's death was the result of a corporate cover-up speaks to a larger issue of accountability and justice in the face of corruption. For the Rivera family and Rey's friends, the fight for answers continues. They won't rest until they know the truth, no matter how long it takes. But with so many layers of conspiracy, deception, and unanswered questions, it's unclear whether the truth will ever come to light. Rey Rivera's death remains one of the most baffling true crime mysteries of the 21st century. Whether he was murdered for what he uncovered, died in a tragic accident, or took his own life, his death is filled with unanswered questions. The conspiracy theories, the involvement of a powerful corporation, and the eerie circumstances of his death have kept people guessing for years. But one thing is certain: Rey Rivera's death was not just the end of his story, it's the beginning of an ongoing investigation that may never find closure. As more theories are proposed, and as more details surface, it's clear that Rey's case will continue to captivate and intrigue those who seek the truth. As we come to the end of our series on Rey Rivera, we leave you with the question: what really happened to him? Was his death the result of a deadly conspiracy, or is there another explanation for this tragedy? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime stories that need to be told. Stay tuned for our next investigation, where we will continue to search for the truth.